This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on women's safety. The participants are Amod Kant, social activist, and Aditi Tandon, journalist.
The horrific gang rape and murder of a young girl in Hyderabad has again shaken the national conscience. Mr. Khan, this is not the first time we are gathered here to discuss this very heinous crime and the trend of rising sexual assault against women as also against children. We still have etched in the national memory the horrendous incident of 2012, December, the gang rape of a physiotherapy student who was returning home after watching a film with her friend. And what had happened? All limits of human brutality had been crossed in that particular case. So much so that India had to revisit the Criminal Amendment Law to cover the scope of that crime, and sexual assault had to be redefined. Under the Justice J.S. Verma Committee, a lot of landmark reforms were suggested, and some of those reforms were carried out. The IPC was comprehensively amended. But clearly, we do not seem to have learnt our lessons yet. How do you view this trend, and what is your first impression after you heard and you saw this horrific crime of Hyderabad?
Well, you are correct that despite the fact that a lot of changes in law took place, there was decidedly a huge arousal of national conscience. People felt extremely sad and bad about it, and there was a revolting situation all over. The kind of one which we saw post-Nirbhaya was unprecedented. On any social issue and demand for change in social legislations, the kind of approach that was seen was never seen earlier. And then after that, people wanted that law to be implemented. Serious efforts have been made to implement the law. Death sentences have been handed down in many cases after that. In some cases, there was a court which had conducted the trial in a matter of days and then sentenced to death. They did some people. But all that doesn't seem to have really that major impact. Apart from that, there are some other issues also, like in this case, when I look into the case, actually as it happened. The pattern appears to be quite similar in many places. I mean, these guys, the four of them, who were decidedly on prowl, who were decidedly on lookout for an opportunity, they were waiting for something like that to do, and then they found this girl in that situation, which according to them was the right situation to commit this kind of crime. Well, this particular case appears to be very peculiar in terms of the actual story. The actual story of the case, as you know, is that these four boys, drunk as they did themselves too, and then in a outlying area near a mall, they keep a watch on these kind of girls coming and parking their vehicle, and they keep in wait, and they puncture the tire and wait further. And after that, everything is so pre-planned. It's horrendous. It's surprising how it happens.
Okay, coming back to this very important pattern that you are pointing out, that this is a premeditated crime which adds to the dimension of the murder, because they actually tried to destroy the entire possible evidence because they burnt the girl alive. And going back to the Nirbhaya issue, if you remember 2012, these 5 accused in even the 2012 case had been out since morning, and they were flying in a bus which was actually meant for school children. So that brings us to the moot question, Mr. Kant, where is preventive policing in our country? Because time and again we have seen that the Parliament has done its job by enacting the stringest possible laws. But the processes seemed to be lacking. The preventive policing is missing. The judicial process is taking painstakingly long time to even hand out death sentences in the Nirbhaya issue. Aren't these systemic gaps in the structure which actually ensure that these criminal minds have no fear of the law?
Coming back to preventive policing, let me tell you that again preventive policing is not something which works positively on the minds of the people. It works negatively in the sense that if there is deterrence, that deterrence may definitely do some kind of preventive work in such crimes. I mean, there are crimes and crimes. Well, in a case of murder, in a case of rape, in a case of, say, this kind of violence, which is very personal, which is very impulsive, where ultimately your baser instinct, the animal instincts, they are in full play. There probably preventive policing is very difficult to do in terms of societal response to it. In fact, both the cases, I would say, I would give some credit to the police. In Nirbhaya case, the investigation was very fast, And the police response was not bad at all. I mean, they responded the way they were supposed to respond in the major parts. I mean, there can be ideal situations beyond that also. In this case also, they have arrested, although there were telltale evidence.
In this Hyderabad case, if you speak to the father of the victim, he gives you a very, very sad account of the way the police immediately responded.
The response was very bad.
No, for instance, I must put this here for our listeners. The fact that the girl's mobile was switched off. The family was trying to contact the girl. The father immediately got in touch with the police, tried to tell them that the phone is off and I suspect that something is really wrong with the girl. You trace the mobile, okay? Even if the mobile is switched off, there are ways to trace the last location of the victim. Perhaps, you could not have prevented her from being gang raped, but maybe you could have prevented her murder had you responded, because these are golden hours. A woman who's caught in front of 5 men who are out to kill her and rape her doesn't have response time, Mr. Kant. At that time, what should the police do?
No, I agree. In this case, the second case, the Hyderabad case, professionally looking into it from the background that I have, I find that the police response was very tardy. It was very bad. I would call it callous. If it really is that somebody was saying where they went for reporting said that this is not jurisdiction. Now the story of jurisdiction is totally archaic. These stories could be taken by someone in olden times. Now past couple of years, the police has to wake up to this situation that there can't be any excuse about jurisdiction. If somebody told about it, the fellow deserves to be sacked and flogged actually, in my opinion. That's something really wrong. I agree. The investigation part has not done so badly. In this case, Delhi Nirbhaya case investigation was definitely much better and that was carried out. But again, coming back to the preventive part of it. Well, somebody told me some time back, I met some people, he said that there are a couple of hundred, maybe 300 or something, number of police control room vans in Hyderabad and they could be activated. Well, they could be activated. There's no doubt about it. And then the time has definitely come when the police has to understand the most challenging situations that the policeman is supposed to face or the police organization is supposed to face happens to be coming from social legislations, crimes against children and women, missing person, and these kind of situations are the most important and they must take the center stage in the police kind of functioning.
Mr. Khan, let me ask you, you're a former cop and there's been a lot of debate nationally around the need for police reforms, the way the police are inducted into the force, the kind of training they undergo. We have for years and years spoken about the fact that a lot of policemen come from patriarchal societies and the gender-sensitive training is not up to the mark. You actually have to disseminate that kind of information. The training module has to be such, or the system of inducting the force has to be such that it is already ready to respond to these societal challenges. Like there are many cases, well documented ones, even if you read the judgments in rape cases, the judgments have recorded that the police, of course Nirbhaya case is an exception, there was national outrage, the Delhi police responded in the best way it could, but the fact of the matter is in a large number of cases of rape across India, police investigations are found to be wanting. So what is the problem with the policing system? How can we correct it?
See, the police reform, which has been long in waiting, 2006 when I was DG Police of Arunachal, that was the time when this famous Prakash Singh case took place and Supreme Court of India handed down very detailed judgment. That judgment was on every part of police functioning and right-thinking police officers felt then and felt now, I feel it even now, that had that judgment and had those reforms been carried out in complete spirit and law, probably things would have slightly improved for police. But second point again arises to my mind, that the police, all said and done, is part of a criminal justice system, which is also archaic. You are still working according to this triumvirate of legal process, which is Indian Penal Code, CRPC and Evidence Act, which is almost the same vintage, 1860s vintage, which also is very outdated. So the issue is that there is a need for change in law, not only to protect the women against such kind of violence or sexual crimes, which has been done to a large extent, but the entire system, criminal justice system, needs to be brought more up to date. I believe Mr. Amit Shah, the Home Minister, has told some words about the change in these kind of laws also. I'll definitely support it.
Okay, till the time the laws are changed, we cannot sit back as a society and wait for crimes to happen. For instance, if you look at the Western models of policing and reactions to heinous crimes like rapes and murders of this order, of the Hyderabad order, you see that the police forces are using technology to crack a lot of crime. For instance, I'm sure these 5 men or 4 men who have come out and you are saying they were on the prowl for the girl. Maybe they have a history of crime. Maybe they were listed somewhere in the past, because even in the Nirbhaya case, the prime accused Ram Singh, who ultimately died in Tihar jail, had a history of crime. So somewhere our police system is missing these people also. And if you remember, Mr. Kant, the Justice J.S. Verma committee had pointed out that we must prepare a sex offenders directory and publicize it widely, but we are nowhere near the registry.
That's correct.
There is no action on that.
On the one hand, when you talk about the practices in other countries, other more advanced countries where policing is done in a different manner, we brought in the system of crisis intervention centers. And then we, for the first time in the country, brought the system of crisis intervention center in Delhi nearly 20 years back. And then there, a police officer joined by a voluntary organization, joined by a lawyer, joined by a doctor, they created a team, and that team would get into the investigation very fast. Coupled with the fast-moving or perhaps the fast-acting police system, which would be able to catch the culprits, joined by again the forensic evidence, which is supposed to be the most important proof, because generally such crimes, evidence is not there in terms of circumstantial evidence or oral evidence. So these are the things, which really require to be done. And I again would like to emphasize that such crimes should be taken to center stage. They are the most important crimes. The other point that you mentioned, the attitude of the police or the approach of police, sensitivity of police, all these things are extremely important, no issues. Some changes have taken place. I would not say that no change has taken place. But yes, in times to come, perhaps more.
What explains, Mr. Khan, the fact that crimes of this nature are actually rising after the very strict criminal law amendment that was framed and drafted and passed by the parliament following the Nirbhaya gang rape and killing?
Well, it is not true really, except that proportionately with the population profile changes, the crime profile changes also. But now these crimes are being accepted in terms of registrations, in terms of investigations. Well, the crime against children, for example, I'll make a reference to the National Study on Child Abuse 2007, which resulted in POCSO. And POCSO provisions were brought into Criminal Law Amendment Act, you know that. So there also, we found that every second child, male and female alike, they were sexually abused.
Something seems to be going seriously wrong with us as a people also. Because after all, the brutality of the crime itself tells a story. What do you think needs to be done at the larger society level? Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in one of his Independence Day speeches, had made a very important remark, and he had actually told parents that you keep asking your daughters where you've been. Have you ever tried and asked your sons, where have you been? Have you been doing the right thing in life? Have you been in good company?
I think that was one of the very same things that Prime Minister spoke, and very valid. From my experience, I would say again, my experience goes down to social sector extensively, 30,000-40,000 beneficiaries, children, and of course boys and girls. All of them I deal with that, and police I have dealt with that. Yes, we are not able to question. The Prime Minister is correct. We should be questioning. Why shouldn't the boys, who are at large all over, be not asked as to where exactly you were there and what exactly you did? That's a fact. And then what they are doing, and in notice we come across variety of situations, variety of acts that they do, which is beyond acceptance. And there is no doubt that the acceptance of such a permissive culture, the acceptance of certain kind of acts on the part of these youngsters, well, I think it has a lot to contribute towards crimes like this.
So clearly the parents and the way they bring their children up also have a role to play in ensuring that such crimes are curbed at the earliest. So on that note, thanks for your time.
You were listening to a discussion on women's safety. The participants were Amod Kant, social activist, and Aditi Tandon, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. This program is also available on our website newsonair.com. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com. You can also follow us on the News on AIR app for updates.